What is it that creates a serial killer? It's got to be one of the most unsettling questions in all of psychology. Now, let's be clear, this explainer isn't about glorifying anyone. It's about understanding. We're going to use the tools of psychology to decode their patterns, their motives, and yeah, the fatal mistakes that always reveal them in the end.
And that's the chilling reality of it all. The greatest horror isn't some monster lurking in the shadows. It's the one hiding in plain sight, the one who's just normal. It's this mask of the ordinary that makes them so incredibly difficult to spot.
So this is the big question, right? This is what we're really digging into. Forensic psychologists have spent decades trying to figure this out, not just what these individuals do, but why. What is the psychological machinery inside someone's head that drives them to cross that line?
Okay, so first things first, we have to dismantle a huge myth. We tend to think of these people as just chaotic, unpredictable forces of nature. But the truth, it's actually far more structured, and honestly, far more terrifying.
You see, every spree has a rhythm. There's this buildup of compulsion, a violent release, and then a calm, quiet return to everyday life. Their violence isn't just random, it's a ritual, one that's hidden inside a perfectly normal routine. And that is the key to understanding them.
So how do we deconstruct this ritual? Well, psychologists use a 4-part framework. Think of it like a blueprint that helps map out the entire cycle of violence and the silence that follows.
It all starts with the motive, that deep psychological hunger for something, usually control or power. This motive then gets expressed through the signature. Those are the unique, ritualistic things they do that fulfill their private fantasy. The MO, or modus operandi, that's just the how, the practical way they get it done. And it often changes as they learn and get better at it. And finally, you've got the cooling off period. That's the return to the mask of normalcy, where the whole twisted cycle starts to build all over again.
And behind that mask, more often than not, we find psychopathy. This is a clinical diagnosis for a personality that's basically missing the emotional glue that holds the rest of us together. They can mimic emotions perfectly. They can look charming, they can look caring, but they don't feel any of the empathy or remorse that would stop most people from causing harm.
So, all right, that's the theory. But what does this actually look like in the real world? Let's take a look at a few infamous cases and see how their specific psychological profiles created very distinct patterns, and, ultimately, how those same profiles led to their downfall.
Just look at this table. It shows exactly how each killer's core psychology was also the very thing that brought them down. Take Ted Bundy. His incredibly organized psychopathic mind was completely betrayed by his own arrogance. Or look at Dennis Rader, the BTK killer. His narcissism was so off the charts that he taunted the police with a floppy disk, which literally led them right to his doorstep. In every single one of these cases, their greatest psychological driver became their fatal flaw.
This quote about Bundy, man, it just nails it. This gets right to the core motive for an organized psychopath like him. It was never about simple anger or revenge. The act itself was about total possession, about having this godlike feeling of power over another person's life. His charm was the tool, but control was always the goal.
And then you get Dennis Rader, and you see a totally different motive at play. His narcissism was so profound that he couldn't stand the idea of being forgotten. After years of silence, he just had to reemerge to taunt everyone, needing to claim ownership of his terrible work. That ego, that desperate need for recognition, was the crack in his mask.
And this brings us to such a crucial point. For all their meticulous planning, for all their illusions of control, it's their own mind that betray them in the end. They aren't caught because they got unlucky, they're caught because their pathology has predictable, exploitable blind spots.
Here you can really see the massive gap between their internal fantasy and the external reality. In their own minds, they see themselves as invincible gods, playing a perfect game of chess. But law enforcement, they see them for what they really are, arrogant, ego-driven people who inevitably make simple, very human mistakes.
And these right here are the exact flaws that criminal profilers are trained to look for. Overconfidence that leads them to take dumb risks. A need for attention that makes them reach out and communicate. A compulsion that gets so strong they just get sloppy. Ultimately, the very psychological drivers that create them are also the things that destroy them.
So why do we study all this? It's not about some morbid curiosity. The real goal of all this psychological work is to move from just reacting to these crimes to actually preventing them. It's about learning the signs so we can protect the future.
This, of course, leads to that age-old question. Are these people born this way, or are they made? Well, psychology shows us the answer is never that simple. There's no single killer gene. Instead, it's more like a toxic constellation of factors. You've got biology, trauma, environment, and opportunity, and they all have to come together in the worst possible way.
At the end of the day, this field isn't about applying a simple, easy label like evil. It's a science. It's a science dedicated to recognizing dangerous patterns, predicting when someone might escalate, and giving law enforcement the tools they need to step in before the next tragedy happens.
And really, that's what this is all about. Understanding is an act of empowerment. When we demystify these figures, when we break them down into patterns and motives and psychological flaws, we take away their power. They're no longer mythical monsters in the dark. They become what they are, broken, predictable human beings.
Because in the end, studying how humanity can break is also a way of studying what holds us all together. Things like empathy, connection, and the refusal to let that darkness win. The key, it seems, isn't just about understanding the monster, but about better understanding ourselves.